Hi, I'm Paul, and I wanted to show you my outboard motor conversion I did from a 20 horsepower Johnson from 1973, which is the lower unit on this. I cleaned it up, painted it black so it looks nice and clean. Then I mounted a brand new 19 horsepower Briggs Stratton motor on the top here with electric start. Now this motor also has a fuel pump on it, so I can lay the fuel tank down in the bottom of the boat. A lot of guys, when they've done it, I've watched on YouTube, they mount a tank up here on top, and I thought that kind of looked kind of junky, but that's up to them. So the fuel pump, in fact, you can get these fuel pumps for about $30 to $40 at your supplier. And also on this side, I want to show you some of the features that I did. I mounted this electrical box on here, which is a 6x6 by 4 inches deep. I put the ignition switch out of a lawnmower on it. Now this ignition switch has got off, on, and start. The 3 positions are needed. But on the back of it, when you buy an ignition switch, make sure that it's got all the terminals marked on it by letter as to what they go for. Because you've got B for battery, G for ground, L for lights or also accessories. You also have one marked S for start, which goes to your start solenoid, which is also mounted inside this box underneath the cover here. And there's also one for magneto, which goes to your magneto and your kill switch setup. This is a kill switch I put in, and an hour meter just to keep track of how long I'm running. It's also a tachometer, and that attaches easily to your spark plug cable that runs back here, and the wire on the back of it's long enough to reach there. You wrap it around 4 or 5 times and tie it with a wire tie, and that holds it together. Also, a feature I put on here that I like, that I saw that someone else did, was this feature right here, a plug-in for your battery. So you can bring your cable up and plug it right in, or unplug it from right there if you want. The other thing I did on this side of the motor, as you can see here, your shift lever is back here. You normally have to reach around the side of the motor to change gears. Well, I moved it up here, put a T-handle on it so I can change those gears right up at the front of the motor with a linkage. Also on this side, on my fuel connection, you can see down here, I took this off the original 20 horse Johnson motor. It's got 1/4 20 threads in it, and I put a little longer bolt here on this one that holds the motor on to the plate so I could screw that on there and have a place to plug in my fuel connection. I used an 1/8 inch thick piece of steel here for my plate to mount everything on. Underneath here in this I have 4 stanchions. They run through 1/2 inch steel pipe, and they're all thread or threaded rod that's 5/16 inch. So I could get the nuts and bolts on it and use the original holes that were in the bottom part of the outboard so I could attach to that lower unit easily. Also on these newer motors, they have a solenoid here on the bottom of the bowl that shuts off. So you want to make sure that gets wired to the accessories on your ignition switch so that it's on when the motor's on, and when you turn it off, it kills that fuel so it doesn't backfire, which is a nice feature. It supposedly has an automatic choke on it. I didn't care for the way it worked, so I put a manual choke on it here, which goes to a plate that's up here, little black flutter butterfly device here. Your ignition, excuse me, not the ignition, the throttle attaches here, and that operates. I ran that cable around, and I actually hooked it up to the handle, which we'll show you on the other side when I get over there and show you how I hooked that up. I completely rebuilt the lower end on this, put a new seal kit in it. Even though it's a 1973, that kit is still available. It wasn't that expensive, maybe 20 bucks. I think I paid almost as much for shipping, but it was doable, fixable. That way the whole lower unit is nice and new. It's got synthetic lube in it, so I don't have to worry about it for quite a while. I don't have to worry about any leakage. And I also, on the shaft of this motor, I took the water pump off it, because I don't need that, because this is air cooled now. It's not water cooled, so you don't need that. Something else I did to make the connection between the motor and the lower unit, I took the motor apart and cut off the stub of the crankshaft up to the counterweight, so that has the socket that you need that goes over the drive shaft. And I used a solid coupler between the motor and that device that I cut off the crankshaft. It's a solid, it's 1 inch shaft on both sides with a keyway. I had to cut a keyway into the part off the drive shaft, so that the keyway would fit into there. I tapered it there so it wasn't all the way and lose its strength, but that way it helps keep them going. There's 2 set screws in it, and it's 1 inch, like I say, diameter inside and out on both of them. Or inside, the outside diameter I believe is 2 inches. And that turned out really nice. Then around the back of the motor, there's nothing fantastic back there, but here on this side of the motor, I don't know if you can see it from that location or not, but it's got electric start right here, and it's got your wires that come off the motor from the original. Here, I'll turn it so the guy at the camera can get a good shot. That's my son Seth, and he's videotaping this for me. And on the motor here, when it comes from Briggs Stratton, you'll have 3 wires coming out. You have a red wire, a gray wire, and a black wire. The red wire is your charging wire that charges your battery, and that has to go in and connects to the battery side of my start solenoid so that it will feed power to my battery to keep it charged when it's running. The gray wire goes to that solenoid shut off that gets wired to the accessories or lights on the ignition switch. And this black wire comes from the magneto, and that's for your kill switch. Then I ran a large black or red wire from my start solenoid out here to the starter. So when you turn the key on, it'll start up. And this wire here is a ground that goes to a ground bar that I mounted inside this box, so all the grounding stuff will go right on that little ground bar to keep it nice and neat and clean. Put a kill switch on it, which works good. Now this throttle is here, and I set that up. It took a little playing with, but I got it so it'll operate with a twist to the handle like the original motor did. And I had to put a stop on both sides of this, put this little piece of steel in here for it to connect to, and mounted this. This came with the throttle cable that I bought, and this hole was already here for if this motor was to be used on a boat that had remote controls up by a remote steering wheel. This handle still lifts up, which is nice. So it worked out pretty good. I'm real pleased with the results. The other thing I did is I put a short extension on here for draining the oil so that you can get it out away from that plate so you can drain it here without the oil all running underneath the motor here. And that's 3/8 inch pipe thread, if you want to know what that is. I don't know what else I can tell you, but I think it turned out looking pretty good. The one thing you want to be careful of is when it's operating, this top screen up here rotates. You want to make sure you don't touch that. I learned that from the School of Hard Knocks. I accidentally reached up there and hit that when I started the motor, and it took the skin off my fingers. So I put some red paint on there, ideally to make it red when it's spinning, so that you'll hopefully remember not to touch that. The motor I got, it's a brand new 19 horse Briggs Stratton. I got that from Northern Tool Supply. Probably cost $630, $650, somewhere in that range. But I wanted to start with a nice motor I knew was going to last. A lot of guys are using them right out of old lawnmowers, which is fine. For as many hours as you're going to put on it, it's probably fine. I just thought it would look cleaner and be a little nicer setup to use. And I don't know what else to tell you other than I'm waiting to get it out on the water and give it a test run and see how it runs. It runs just fine right here. In fact, first crank when I got it going started right up immediately. Surprised me. So I'm anxious to get it on the water and see what it can do. My only really big concern is to see if it'll idle down far enough for slow trolling. So that's all for now. Hope you've enjoyed this video and learned something from it. And hopefully if you try this, that you're kind of mechanically inclined, because it takes a little thought process to get everything in order, to be able to hook them together and to get it to look nice and to work nice. So have a good day on the water and be safe.